See what you're doing.
Hello, hello.
All right.
Well, oh yeah, sorry. All right.
Jamie's trying to catch me out there with sometimes Jamie starts the countdown for our podcast software as when I'm mid-conversation, and then luckily I notice and stop whatever I'm saying.
I'm trying to get him cancelled. You should hear what he says off air.
I'm so controversial.
Yeah. Feeling good? Feeling ready for this app?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm hyped as always.
Yeah. We had breakfast together this morning, didn't we?
Yeah, it was lovely.
And that wasn't because I woke up in James's bed either.
No, for once.
It was an off-site breakfast meeting.
Yeah. No, it was very nice. So we've already spent far too much time together today.
You had avocado on toast with a side of bacon.
Yeah, it was all right. Not the best breakfast I've had in Norwich, it must be said.
Yeah, I had eggs Benedict.
It's a bit cold. The eggs are a bit cold. I don't know about
Were
yours.
They?
Yeah.
I inhaled mine. I didn't even take a temperature check, but
no, fair.
And I only had eggs Benedict because is that what I had? Yeah, because they'd run out of salmon.
Yeah, you got done there. That was unlucky.
Anyway, invigorating content there.
Yeah.
This is why you come back to listen to send better emails. I've had 2 coffees, which is 1 coffee over my daily limit as well.
You must be buzzing.
Well, as buzzing as I get.
I wondered why you were trembling.
Yeah. Caffeine's weird, isn't it? It's like it's not proper energy. When I have caffeine, like I've had pre-workout before as well, it's like this out of sync energy. Like the energy I have is out of sync with what my body feels. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's artificial.
Yeah, so
synthetic.
I feel sluggish and energized at the same time. It's weird.
Yeah, it's not a nice feeling, is it?
No. Anyway, what do you want to talk about this week?
So we're going to talk about, as part of, this is part of the trilogy of creator-focused podcasts that we're doing.
Part 2.
Part 2, 2 towers.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about the 2 pillars that content creators ought to focus on when they think about what they're going to write about in their newsletter. And it's funny, Jamie, because we did an episode very similar to this not that long ago, which was what do businesses write about for their newsletter? And actually, we're going to be borrowing some of the content from that, but with a couple of very important twists, because, of course, creators are not the same as businesses, and the way they write their newsletter shouldn't be the same either.
Okay, nice. So this isn't just a reskin of our previous episode. This is brand new content.
It's going to have plenty of juicy originals.
We have new ideas. And how long do you want this episode to be, James?
Well, I don't want to jinx it, but I want to be shooting for about 20 minutes again.
20 minutes. Okay.
I think that's a sweet spot for us. I think anything longer, and we probably shouldn't be waffling so much.
Yeah. Okay. Let's aim for that. We've got 17 minutes to go.
Yeah. Easy.
Nice. Okay. So, the 2 towers, 2 pillars,
the 2 pillars. Yeah.
Of, content creator newsletters, content pillar towers.
Yeah. So in our first episode about this, which focused on businesses, we talked about thinking of our X's. And for that, we were referring to expertise, experience, and exclusivity. Oh, I nearly forgot one of them then. So those were the 3 things. And we if you want to go back and listen, then please do. We elaborated on those. I think for creators, it's slightly different. I think we definitely ought to focus on expertise if our content is expertise driven. So, if we have a YouTube channel where we're teaching something to our audience, then it follows that our newsletter should continue that expertise on and hopefully offer even more of it. And likewise, if let's say we're on LinkedIn, we're a LinkedIn influencer, for want of a better term, and our LinkedIn content focuses on giving advice to marketers, for example. Again, that's expertise that we should continue through to our newsletter. But really, what I would be focusing on if I was a creator are the other 2 X's. So experience, the stuff that makes you, your lived experience as a human, and exclusivity. So giving something extra that you can't get from other places on the internet. And I think exclusivity is particularly important if you're a creator.
Okay, cool. To make this episode helpful for people, do you think we should run through some examples of what that could look like, to kind of breathe some life into these concepts? If we take an example, your average content creator, maybe influencer, who has a TikTok or an Instagram or a YouTube audience. I don't know, maybe they've got to 100K, maybe they're at 1 mil, 2 mil, or maybe 10 mil plus, right? But they don't have a newsletter, and they decide um, to build a newsletter audience. And on their channels, they're posting lifestyle content. So it's kind of maybe less lifestyle, maybe it's like slice of life content, right? So it's like, here's like, get ready with me, it's here's what I did today, this typical vlog kind of content. Talk me through the two pillars of what that might look like for this person. Do you think that's a helpful thing to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I think where I would be starting is thinking about my audience, right? So I'd be thinking, who am I actually speaking to? And again, we've talked about this idea of writing to an audience of one. I think that is particularly pertinent when you're a creator and when you have this pseudo personal relationship with your followers. And I think to use your example, the creators that do best in that genre are the ones that manage to cultivate a relationship wherein their followers on whatever platform they're on feel as though they know the creator, right? They feel as though they have a relationship that goes beyond something superficial and into something more meaningful. They feel like they have a relationship with the creator. And so your newsletter audience should be considered an intense distillation. I struggle with that word, a distillation of your social audience. So it is the people who are most dedicated. They're your biggest fans, these people. And as such, again, linking it to these two pillars, once we understand that, once we know, okay, these are the people who not only follow me in the first instance on whatever social platform I'm on, but they've then taken the leap to share their personal data, to opt in to get even more from me. What can I give them as a reward? That's how we ought to be framing this question. How can we reward the commitment that they've given me? What can I give them that's going to really delight them, entertain them, make them feel special, make them feel even more involved in my ecosystem? And I think this is where exclusivity and experience comes in. We want to be sharing even more of ourselves. And I know that can feel like a tough ask, because a lot of creators are already sharing quite a lot of themselves. Let's be honest, we live in a generation of uber honesty where, unlike Jamie, when you and I were teenagers, and the idea talking about mental health was still relatively taboo. Like, that's something now that is incredibly popular and really endears creators to their audience. People are much more willing to share on social media just as a culture than we used to be, where there was cynicism and worry and maybe fear around sharing too much of yourself on social media. That seems to have gone now. It's a lot more normalized. So what I'd be looking for in my newsletter is, okay, how can I take these people deeper into my life? How can I share more of myself in a way that is obviously we want to make sure that we're being kind to ourselves here as well. This isn't about like laying yourself bare, but it's about thinking, okay, what are the blind spots at the moment in my social media that can be filled through this newsletter? So a real world example might be, let's say I've published a video on YouTube and it's like a vlog or something like that. Or let's say I've done a podcast episode or an interview with someone else in the space. What I might talk about in my newsletter is like a behind the scenes of that day. So I might say, okay, I've just done this podcast with so-and-so, maybe a famous person. What were they actually like? What happened when the camera was turned off? Like, how did it come to be? Like, what process did I need to go through in order to get into a room with this person? And, what happened immediately after we turned the mics off? Like, what did they tell me? Like, what is the thing that I haven't shared anywhere else, but I'm going to share here with you guys because you're my mega fans? That's one example. So in that sense, like when we link it back to these pillars, we think experience and we think exclusivity. both of those things, both of those boxes are ticked when we start sharing stories like that. Yeah, because we're talking about experiences that are personal to us. You know, Chat GPT is not going to be able to tell you what happened after the mics were switched off. And we're also talking about exclusivity, like you can't get this on my Instagram stories, you can't get this on my YouTube channel. This newsletter is the only place where you're going to get this stuff.
Yeah, okay. I think what I like particularly about that, you mentioned right at the start there about an audience of one, something that we've spoken about before. And if you've not heard us speak about this or other people speak about this, it's about imagining that you're writing to one person in your audience as opposed to writing your audience to your audience as a whole. And maybe some of the exclusivity part of this comes down to how you talk to people in your newsletter versus how you talk to people on social media. For anyone who is familiar or has watched anyone on social media, you know, these videos might start with, hey guys, or hey everyone, or whatever. You know, it's very public. Any video that's being shared on social media is like, okay, this is me on a platform talking to many. And what we have an opportunity to do in our newsletter is to say, okay, well, I'm not talking to many here. I'm talking to each single person that's receiving my newsletter. And I'm communicating here by a form of what is essentially a letter. And so, you know, some of this exclusivity plays into that. How do we communicate with people versus how we communicate with people on social media? You know, this is the inner sanctum. This is the inner circle that you've built of these loyal mega fans, and they deserve to be spoken to in maybe a slightly different way. So that means maybe you change the tone slightly to how you normally talk on social media. You know, this kind of behind the curtain feel, and that can come down to tone and communication style. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily bear all when it comes to, you know, mental health challenges or anything like that. You know, there are ways we can be clever with here and how we communicate.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I think maybe the easiest thing to do is just to like link it with actual creators, you know. So if you're Mr. Beast, for example, he's publishing these hugely viral videos pretty much on a weekly basis on his main channel. I know he has other channels as well. You know, what I'd be talking about in my newsletter if I was Mr. Beast is like exclusive behind the scenes stuff, like funny stuff that happened on set that like isn't going to make it into the main video because, you know, videos are time constrained and he has all of these algorithms that he needs to satisfy in terms of retaining attention. That's not something we have to worry about in newsletters, as we talked about in the last episode. You know, we are not beholden to the algorithm here. Mr. Beast is going to get plenty of opens, plenty of engagement, lots of people sticking around reading the whole of his emails, particularly if he makes them interesting and he makes them personal to him. So, you know, what did he have for, we've just talked about what we had for breakfast, Jamie. What did Mr. Beast have for breakfast on the morning of this shoot? And, you know, like, what does he get to eat? And like, is there catering on set? And like, what does that involve? Like, that's a whole newsletter right there. Like, that's an interesting newsletter if you're a Mr. Beast mega fan. Like, maybe something, maybe there's a whole newsletter about health and safety on his video shoots and what that involves, and like introduce the guy who's in charge of health and safety at Mr. Beast. And you know, like all of that stuff is fascinating. It's a lift behind, as you say, it's a look behind the curtain. And you know, we owe that to newsletter subscribers. I think one common question is, well, okay, why did newsletter subscribers get that and not Instagram followers or YouTube subscribers? You know, why are we only giving that to newsletter? And I think the long and short is because, firstly, subscribing to a newsletter is a way more intentional action and therefore ought to be rewarded. And secondly, it is one step further down your funnel. And this is where we link it back to monetization, which is the main focus of our last podcast, which was around, you know, if we have a strong newsletter following, we have a much sturdier platform to launch products, to invite people to events, to, you know, upsell services, to build a community, whatever it is we want to do, however we want to monetize. The newsletter audience is where we should start. And so, you know, it follows that those people are more dedicated and therefore we give them a different type of content.
Yeah. Okay. And I like it. I think, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to differentiate as well our audience. What we're trying to do here is be less dependent on social media platforms to provide us with our income as a creator, and to build out and to diversify where our income is coming from, right? And so it needs to look different. It needs to behave differently to it's not an extension of social media. It should be, in many ways, it should be its own entity that has its own style and form. It is linked to social media because you're using social media as an acquisition channel to build your newsletter list, right? But it should be seen as, okay, well, this newsletter could be, I don't know, it's its own asset. And maybe if my YouTube channel closed, the newsletter business would still be open and it would generate its own revenue. So, we need to kind of see it like that as well. And so it deserves a different kind of style, different approach, different kind of communication methods, and is a reason why having exclusive things in your newsletter is so important. People who have we've spoken to creators who have maybe 3 different YouTube channels, all with their own following. And what we perhaps want to use the newsletter for there is something that doesn't cover what any of those 3 channels are covering, right? And it's maybe this is, like you said, this is me behind the scenes, behind the 3 channels. This is the thing that ties it all together. And I think that could be a nice approach for a newsletter. Maybe we should talk about what should the newsletter not be. And we spoke a little bit there about experience, so your lived experience, and talking candidly about that, and also exclusivity. What we don't want is, we don't want your newsletter to just be a bulletin board for your social media content, right?
Yeah, which is really common, by the way. Yeah, we've talked before about the fact that newsletters don't do that well when it comes to sharing other content. Like, they just don't. Like, people want to stay in their inbox for the most part, and so moving them to your YouTube channel or your Instagram just doesn't work that well. Like, you're going to get some clicks for sure, you're going to get some traffic, but in terms of like a driver for traffic, your newsletter shouldn't be seen as, this is not a channel that is going to help to build your social channels, really, not in a particularly meaningful way. If you've already got enough social following that you would consider yourself a creator on socials, the newsletter isn't really going to make much of a dent into your audience. So no, we would not sit here, and you'll notice that at no point have Jamie and I said, if you build a newsletter, your videos are going to get more views or you're going to get more Instagram followers, because they're going to send followers both ways. Like, that doesn't really happen. So yeah, I agree, Jamie. And as we've and this is something that you say a lot, Jamie, which I love. We don't want to send people the wrong way down the funnel either. like if they've subscribed to your newsletter, they've already taken extra action from your socials to get to your newsletter. Don't send them back to your socials, because they've probably already seen your socials. This is going the wrong way.
Yeah, we want them to take the next meaningful action, which is something that ties into what I want to ask you next, and might well be the final point. Depends how long you waffle on this, but we've spoken. This episode's been about what creators should write about in the newsletter, and you've covered exclusivity, covered experience. One thing that we could expect creators also to put in their newsletter, and that something that we have put in our own newsletter businesses, and something that we've helped creators do as well, is put content in the newsletter, which is essentially a brand partnership. So an advert, right? And so I think we should dedicate a little bit of time here in talking about how that's presented and how that's written, because we've talked about what to write about. For some of our creators, we'll be writing about, for a portion of the newsletter, is an advert.
Yeah.
So how for you, how are those weaved in? How are those talked about? And how, in terms of the best performing and best practices there, how do we approach that?
Yeah, I think the most important decision you make when you're including ads in your newsletter is, what brands are you actually going to work with? And I think if you get that part right, the rest becomes quite easy. So I would be looking for brands that I genuinely use myself. And if you do that as a creator, your advert is going to be that much more effective, just naturally, because you genuinely endorse a product. You're not just endorsing it because you're getting the bag. So where we've seen most success with in newsletter ads, they have been a personal endorsement from the writer. So we've been able to say, I love this, you'll love it too. And that is so much more compelling than choosing a brand to work with that it isn't really an immediate audience fit, that doesn't resonate with you or, the people that you expect to be reading your newsletter. So that sounds like quite an obvious point, but I think, it probably takes a whole episode to talk about how to write a great newsletter ad. I think everything becomes way easier if you're picking a brand that you actually use. And if you're hearing about them from the first time and you get an email that says, we want to sponsor your newsletter, at the very least, give them a go, like download the app. Or, if it's a newsletter that want to advertise in your newsletter, read the newsletter. If you genuinely like it, that's when you say yes. If you don't, say, sorry, I don't think you're quite for me. And just be honest in that regard. It can be very tempting to take the money. The fact of the matter is your adverts will perform way better if your audience trust that you are curating products that you genuinely like and want to recommend. In the long run, if you're just picking any old thing, and we see loads of newsletters, there are newsletters that are based in the UK and have a UK audience. There are advertising like cannabis products that aren't even legal here, that you can only get in California. It just doesn't make sense. And not only are they not going to make much money from that, but it just means the next time they include an ad, people are just going to scroll straight past because they're like, these ads aren't for me. These ads aren't interesting. I think there's a false belief that ads are always annoying and are always shit and are always going to piss off your audience. That is just not the case. If you're choosing audience relevant stuff that your audience will genuinely find helpful, you could argue you're actually doing your audience a favor by introducing it to their lives. We don't live in a world where people don't want to buy stuff. We live in a world where people want to be thoughtful and intentional with the stuff they do buy. And so helping your audience to do that is a great service to them.
Absolutely. And I think what I would add on there is that there is actually nothing wrong with grabbing the bag, as you put it. Obviously monetizing your newsletter is a fundamental reason to building it in the first place, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we now live in a time though that people see through celebrity endorsements, they see through paid ads, and what we want to do is, like James said, make it meaningful, make it intentional, and turn the advert into content as well. I've watched a great piece of content from someone recently who had like a household name sponsorship, partner sponsorship, and he turned it into a piece of content. It was interested in and of itself, but it was also obvious that it was a brand partnership, but it also aligned with his true passion as well. And so when you do all of that, you get that magic mix of, okay, I am getting the bag here from a great brand partnership, but I'm also creating valuable content, and it's something that I'm going to enjoy doing in the process.
Everyone wins in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick hot take.
Have you got one?
I don't actually. I mean, we could skip it this time if you like.
No, I'm gonna say, what's a good hot take here? I want it to actually be hot. I want it to be spicy. Hot in a spicy way. Yeah, my hot take is going to be, if you don't have an advertiser that suits your audience, you're better off not advertising at all.
Okay, nice.
Bit off piece because it's not really directly related to the content we've been talking about.
That's right.
Advertisers is a whole other episode. But yeah, I think it's ultimately way more damaging to start including ads that aren't relevant to your audience than it is to just not have anything in there at all. Yeah, take a short-term hit for a long-term gain.
I can make my hot take content focus if you like to balance it out.
Thank you.
I would give yours. Maybe we should start rating each other's hot takes as well to encourage us to be spicier.
Okay.
I'm going to say yours is maybe like a 5.8.
I think you've been really generous.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to be as generous. I'm not be as generous to you. So.
Oh, fuck you then. It's 3.8. Okay. Mine is going to be if you are not offering something exclusive and you're just regurgitating social media content in your newsletter, you might as well not bother.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, might as well not bother. I'm not sure about. Yeah, they shouldn't bother, but you're wasting your time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty spicy.
No, wait. Let me change
Oh,
it.
okay.
Okay, if you're not offering something exclusive in your newsletter and you're just regurgitating social media content, you're wasting everyone's time.
Oh, okay. You've added an extra point on the spicy scale for that. I'm going to give you
Okay.
I'm going to give you a 6 for that.
6. Okay, nice.
I'll give you a 6 because it wasn't ideally for extra spice. If it was something that we hadn't already said in the podcast, I would have appreciated that more.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just giving you feedback for next time.
Okay, I like it. Let's keep rating each other's hot takes because it's going to push us to improve and be better.
Yeah, agreed.
But we can never give a 10.
We might even start thinking about what our hot takes are going to be, before we get on a mic and start recording an episode. Who knows?
I'm going to hot take camp. I'm going to train.
Yeah. There's probably a newsletter for that somewhere.
Yeah, true. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Anything else, James?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And look out for our... we're going to do a mini ep. I don't know what we're going to call it yet. It's going to be a little spicy ep.
Yeah.
James and Jamie get spicy.
Yeah.
No, that's
Spice Lounge.
Spice.
We should record it in Spice Lounge.
Well, we could. We've already recorded it. So.
Yeah, true. Oh yeah. The next one, the sequel. Yeah. The sequel.
Spice Lounge 2.
Yeah.
Featuring Spice Lounge.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's stop wasting everyone's time.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.